Hey everybody, welcome back to Coder and Nurse Mentor YouTube channel. If this is your first time here, I'm nurse practitioner Aquila. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you've been here before and have been supporting Coder and Nurse Mentor channel, you know that today is the third video in our three-part series for medication math calculations. Today we're going to be talking about infusions, you guys. So let's get right into it. First, we're going to talk about the abbreviations and terms that go along with discussing and calculating IV infusion rates. So I have a few of the abbreviations and the terms here, but I want you guys to take a look at this slide. This slide are some of the most frequent terms that you're going to see, pretty much some of the only terms that you're going to see as it relates to IV infusions. So you have the IV, which means intravenous. Then you have the GTT. That is the abbreviation for drop. With the S on the end of that is the abbreviation for drops. H for hour. MLs we talked about in the previous videos for milliliter. MIN is for minute. And then you can kind of figure out the last three there. But I do want to talk about those last three abbreviations with you. So let's do this. So there are three terms that were at the end of that chart that I wanted to review with you in more depth in this video. The first one I want to talk about is the drop factor. Okay, you're going to see that phrase a lot, especially in some of your test questions. I want you to know that the drop factor is the number of drops per milliliter printed on the IV tubing package set. So in your questions, when you are trying to figure out the flow rate, the drop factor is very important to the flow rate. You will be given the drop factor. So it'll either tell you that the drop factor is 20 drops per milliliter or 15 drops per milliliter. So pay attention to that because you're going to need that information in order to conduct or calculate the flow rate. The other terms that are at the end of the abbreviation term chart that I wanted to review with you in a little more depth is the flow rate and the milliliters per hour. So the flow rate is the drops per minute, and you need the drop factor, which we just reviewed, in order to calculate what the flow rate is. So very important. And flow rate is going to be the big question that's going to be asked on a lot of your IV infusion rate tests. Then the milliliters per hour is instrumental in you identifying the total amount of fluid that was infused to the patient. Let's say for your shift, if you're on a unit, a med-surg unit in a hospital. So you want to know how many milliliters per hour the patient is getting at the end of your 8-hour shift. You can calculate that up and enter that in on the I's and O's flow sheet. So you are going to have to do some converting in your IV infusion calculations. And this is one of the main conversions that you're going to have to do. So you may get your information in your test question presented to you in hours or minutes. And a lot of the formulas, especially the one that we're using today, you have to convert to minutes. So I wanted you to know how to do that. So we all know that there are 60 minutes in 1 hour, okay? So that's what you're always gonna keep in mind. So the conversion, if you're going from minutes to hours, is you're gonna take the number of minutes and you're gonna divide it by 60, okay? And then if you're going from hours to minutes, you're gonna take the number of hours and you're gonna multiply that by 60. Let's work that out really quick. All right. If we're gonna go from minutes to hours, let's say you have 480 minutes. So the question says that you're gonna infuse 2,500 milliliters of fluid in 480 minutes. Well, when you're trying to calculate your I's and O's at the end of the shift, what does that mean? We want to change that to hours to make it a little bit easier. So you'll take the number of minutes and you'll divide that by 60 and your answer will be 8 hours. And then let's take that back the other way. So you're given 8 hours. So you're going to infuse 2,500 milliliters of fluid in 8 hours. you're gonna multiply that by 60 to see how many minutes, because now you're trying to figure out what's the flow rate gonna be for this patient. And your answer will be 480 minutes. Just like that. Another principle you're going to need to know in order to correctly calculate infusion flow rates is that you need to be able to round correctly, okay? Because drops should always be rounded to the nearest whole number. So some of your calculations will leave you with a decimal point in your number. You have to round to the nearest whole number. So let's do that really quick here. Okay, so let's say your answer after correctly calculating the flow rate, you come up with 12.38 drops per minute, okay? So remember, you cannot leave your answer that way. You have to round it to the nearest whole number. All right, when you're deciding whether to round the number or leave it the same, what you wanna do first is look at the number that is to the right of the decimal point. If the number to the right of the decimal point is lower than 5, then the number to the left of the decimal point is going to stay the same. So this answer, the way that the decimal point came out, would be 12 drops per minute for the flow rate, okay? I'll leave that up and give another example. Let's say your answer came out to be 12.58 drops per minute. Again, we have to round, right? You're rounding to the nearest whole number. So you want to take a look at the number that's immediately to the right of the decimal point, and that number is 5. So because that number is 5, the number immediately to the left is going to go up once. So your answer would be 13 drops per minute, okay? So below 5 or 5 and above are your deciding factors to whether you're gonna leave the number to the left of the decimal point the same or raise that number to the next whole number, okay? Now that you have all of that information, you are ready to move forward with calculating. So let's go over our first formula. The first one that I wanted to introduce you to was how to calculate milliliters per hour. So how many milliliters per hour the patient is getting. The calculation, or the formula for that calculation, is taking the total milliliters and divide it by the total amount of time in minutes. Now, some of your questions that you'll get on your math medication test for IV infusions will give you the total amount of time, but it'll give you that in hours. But we already went over how to convert, so we'll do that first, okay? And then you'll get the milliliters per hour. So let's take a look at this question. The question says the NP orders 850 milliliters of normal saline to be infused over 6 hours. How many milliliters per hour is the patient getting? So you have your total milliliters, which you need for this formula, and then you have your total time. But your total time is in hours. So the formula calls for the total time to be in minutes. So let's convert that first. So you'll take your total number of hours and you'll multiply that by 60 because there's 60 minutes in an hour. And you should get 360. So that's 360 minutes. Now you have the correct information in the correct format that you need in order to plug it into that formula and get your final answer. So we have 850 milliliters over 360 minutes. Just get rid of this real quick. You divide those into each other and you're going to get your milliliters per hour, which ends up being 2.3 0.36 milliliters per hour. Now, you can round that, and using the rounding principles that I showed you before, look at the number immediately to the right of the decimal point. It's 3, it's below 5, so you can round that down to 2 milliliters per hour. That's it. Let's do one more question. The nurse practitioner orders 2,500 milliliters of D5 normal saline to be infused over 20 hours. What is the milliliter per hour? All right, so you have the information that you need in order to fill it into the formula. First, you needed the total number of milliliters to be infused, and then you needed the total time. Again, the time is in hours, so first we're going to convert the hours to minutes so that we can plug it into this formula. So we'll take the number of hours times 60, because there's 60 minutes in each hour, and your answer will be 1,200 minutes. Now we can plug that information into the formula and get our milliliters per hour. So you have 2,500 milliliters. You have 2,500 milliliters over 1,200 minutes equals milliliters per hour, which comes out to 2.08 milliliters per hour. Now, if we take our rounding principles into account, then we know that the number immediately to the right of the decimal point is 0 or below 5. So that means the number to the left of the decimal point is going to stay the same. So that can be 2 milliliters per hour. And that's it. Now here is the second formula that I wanted to discuss with you in this video, and that is the flow rate, or the drops per minute, as we went over in the abbreviations term portion of this video a little while ago. So the formula in order to calculate the flow rate is taking the total volume in milliliters over the total time in minutes multiplied by the drip factor, or the drops per milliliter. And then you will get your flow rate. Okay, you're going to get a lot of these questions in your IV infusion medication math calculation test. So this one is a really good one to keep in your pocket, this formula. So what do you need in order to conduct this formula? You need the total milliliters, the total amount of time, and remember, we're going to do that in minutes, and you may be given the time in hours, so convert first. And then the drop factor, which you will get in your question. And that's the one that I referred to earlier, where it'll say 15 drops per milliliter or 20 drops per milliliter. That is your drop factor. All right, let's go ahead and put this formula into action. First question. The nurse practitioner orders 300 milliliters of ampicillin sodium to infuse over 40 minutes with a drop factor of 20 drops per milliliter. What is the flow rate? So first we have to make sure we have all of the information we need in order to plug into this formula so that we can get our flow rate. So let's check that first. Total volume. Yep, we have that. 300 milliliters of ampicillin sodium. Time in minutes. Now this question gave us the time in minutes. Thank goodness. Over 40 minutes. And then we also need the drop factor, with a drop factor of 20 drops per milliliter. So we have all of the information we need in order to plug it into this formula and get the correct answer, which is the flow rate for this question. So let's go ahead and do that. So total volume, we have the 300 milliliters over the total time in minutes, so 40 minutes, And we're gonna multiply that answer by the drop factor, which is 20 drops per milliliter. And that will give us our flow rate. And if you did all this calculating correctly, your answer for the actual flow rate should be 150. So you have 150 drops per minute, and that is how you calculate your flow rate. Let's do one more question. Second question. Nurse practitioner orders 2,500 milliliters of normal saline to be infused over 20 hours with a drop factor of 20 drops per milliliter. How many drops per minute, or what is the flow rate for this patient's infusion? First, we'll check to make sure we have all of the elements that we need in order to plug it into this formula. So, total volume in milliliters. Yep, we have that. 2,500 milliliters. Time. Now we have the time, but we don't have it in minutes. We have 20 hours, so we're gonna have to convert that. We know that right away. And the drop factor, with the drop factor of 20 drops per milliliter. So we have everything we need. We just have to do one simple conversion, and then we can plug the information into our formula. Okay, so first let's convert the 20 hours over to minutes. So just put an arrow here. So that's 20 times 60, and you got 1,200 minutes. All right, so, and now let's plug that information into the formula. Total volume, 2,500 milliliters. Total time in minutes, we got 1,200 minutes. Multiply that answer by the drop factor, which is 20 drops per milliliter, so 20. And that will give us the flow rate, or AKA the drops per minute. So the final answer for this calculation ends up being 41.6. Okay. So, like I said before, when you're calculating the flow rate, the drops cannot be in a decimal point. You have to round them. So let's go through our rounding principles. So the number immediately to the right of the decimal point is 6. So it's above 5, which means the number immediately to the left of the decimal point will go up by 1. So this is equal to 42 drops per minute, which is the flow rate. So we did it, you guys. We got through a bunch of formulas and a bunch of concepts that are super important in order for you to be able to calculate IV infusion flow rates, milliliters per hour, and anything that you need to know to get through your infusion math medication test. So we did it. We're at the end of our series of medication math calculations. So we had 3 videos. The first one we reviewed conversions. The second one we did some oral medication math calculations. And then we just reviewed the infusion calculation rates. So we went over 3 different formulas in this video. And just to recap, we did a formula on how to get the flow rate, which is a very frequent question in your IV medication math test in nursing school. We also found out how to come up with the milliliters per hour. And then we went through converting from hours to minutes and vice versa. So I hope this was helpful to you guys. If you need anything else related to infusions, please do me a favor and leave a comment below. Thank you guys so much again for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, Code Red Nurse Mentor. channel on YouTube. Like if you like anything that I'm presenting to you in all of these videos. Also, head on over to Facebook and join our Facebook Code Red Nurse Mentor and Support group. We have tons of student nurses and professional nurses in the group that are there ready to help you and support you through nursing school. Also, check out our website. I'm going to leave some free content from this video today that you can download if you go to www.coderedrn.com. Click on the Mentor tab, scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, and you will find the formulas that we reviewed today, as well as a practice test for infusion rates. So don't forget to do that. And then we're also on Instagram if you guys want to check us out there at coderednurse.com. There's tons of information that I put on there that'll help the community as far as chronic disease and just things that we need to be aware of in day-to-day life as it relates to healthcare. So again, I appreciate you guys so much. It's Nurse Practitioner Aquila. I will see you on the next video.